My name is Rudolf Dittrich. I'm responsible for developing all race cars at BMW Motorsport. The job is to, first of all, plan, manage and foresee the programs that are most suitable for the BMW group as such within the context of motorsport, and that includes real racing as well as virtual racing. We figured out that the simulator is going to be a very important resource for us to help the efficiency of the development for new race cars, but as well as, for example, for training drivers or for preparing events. The drivers come here for 2 days before every race, and it's not only the drivers coming here, it's the entire crew. So we're not only preparing the drivers for the race events, but also the engineering crew that works with the drivers at the races. If you think about vehicle development, you can test things that are hardly possible to test on a racetrack. Say, for example, you have what would be a very large change in the car and would take hours to swap on the car. In reality, in the meantime, your track has evolved. This is something you can test back to back multiple times in the simulator because you virtually have no change time of the car configuration. That's one aspect, and the circumstances are always very consistent. Another aspect, you could, for example, swap your location. So you could, for example, say, I'm testing in the morning in Valencia in Spain, and in the afternoon I want to test the same thing in Hockenheim in Germany. In reality, obviously hardly possible. On a simulator is no problem at all. And so there's things where you can take advantage during the development of a car, but then also obviously during event preparation, you can simulate every single scenario you could think of that could occur at a race weekend, and by preparing it and practicing it, you just enter the race weekend in a much more mature fashion and much more synchronized across all team members. The simulator becomes more and more essential as the number of track days or test days that are allowed by regulations are reduced and reduced. So by virtue, you have to go virtual for some of these tests because you simply don't have time. At the track, on the other hand, there's also things that are becoming more and more sophisticated and are getting more difficult to actually extract some real solid results at a racetrack. And on the other hand, obviously also technology evolved. So the simulator that we are using here would have been hardly possible a couple of years ago, just say, for example, because of computational power. The simulator that you find over there obviously has components which are off the shelf, but as a package as such, it's totally custom made, and a lot of it, and the most important part of it, is purpose-built and developed in-house. And what it is about is to give the driver the best possible immersion and give him the best possible sensation of what the real car would do. That starts with just the drive environment. So he sees, he feels whatever he would see and feel in the real car. That's the one aspect. And the other aspect, while driving, he gets the cues that are telling him what the car is or is about to do. And the reference for us is if he's driving the car in the simulator with the same style, so the driving style is the same in the simulator, and in the reality, that's a very good indication that the simulator actually works as it should. We have a couple of senses as a human being: seeing, feeling, hearing. That's all impressions that a driver gets. And obviously we want to replicate as many of them as close as possible. Since sound is relatively easy to do in terms of sensation, in terms of perception, this is something we obviously wanted to take on board and also there give the driver as realistic feel of the car as possible. There's a few things that you cannot replicate. Otherwise you would need a very, very large space for the simulator just to get the movement done. But what we're trying to do is identify the most important cues that the driver needs to get a sensation of what the car is doing, and we're trying to replicate those. But as we say, we're limiting ourselves to replicating those very important sensations and just skip all the rest of it. Our philosophy is, if we can't do it properly, we leave it away completely. We do simulate weather in terms of, mainly in terms of temperature, because that's, for example, in Formula E, very important to get the energy management for the battery going. We do not simulate, for example, rain, because in rain you never know how much it's going to be raining, and the car behavior is changing quite dramatically depending on the amount of rain. The simulator is, although it looks constant, it's always evolving. It's always evolving. There's little things that are changing the feel of the driver. In terms of hardware, you just mentioned the sound system before. Beyond the sound system, there's also very minor little things that will change the driver's feel and perception, so those are continuously upgraded, and beyond that obviously the model is being evolved, so the mathematical representation of the car is being evolved week by week. We obviously also have tools that allow us to simulate the lap without a driver, but there's various aspects during the development but also during the event preparation where you need the driver input for various reasons. First of all, you want to adapt the car to the driving style of the driver, and on the other hand you also want to get feedback of what a driver can handle or what the driver can sense. Otherwise we could do the simulation without the driver, but this is exactly the feedback that we want to have. How is the driver reacting to a certain change? What does the driver feel? What can a driver handle during a lap? Because especially during Formula E, it's quite busy in the cockpit. It's not just, accelerating and braking. There's various things that the driver needs to be doing, and we just need to know all the wishes that the engineers have. What can the driver actually accomplish throughout the lap? So the simulator helps the driver to prepare for a race weekend, because as the driver then comes to the racetrack, he knows the track, he knows the car, he knows the setup, and he knows the working procedures with his engineers for that upcoming event. So the way we're structuring the facilities, obviously you have the simulator itself, then you have a control room for the simulator, but in the control room we only want the engineers who are actually necessary to operate the simulator. And the entire other remaining engineering crew we locate in here, and the engineers in here will find the very same working environment as they would find at the racetrack, so they also have a simulation of what they will get during a race weekend, and this is how we structure a session. Well, this is the beauty of BMW Motorsport in general. Everything's very compact, so everything's literally around the corner, and in case you need somebody from another department, you just walk 10 meters or whatever and you'll get him. So in Formula E especially, luckily all the teams have now agreed to work together to become more efficient, because it doesn't make sense for every team to build their own track, because after all they're all racing on the same track. So the way we do it is you commission a company that is scanning the track, laser scanning the track, and that's very accurate. The track is captured in a grid which is 5 by 5 millimeter in horizontal plane, and then the resolution of every single bump is 0.1 millimeters, so very, very accurate. And from this raw data then you go away and you build what the driver sees. So it's a two-step process. One is the actual physical representation of the surface of the racetrack, and then the rest is just what the driver needs to be seeing to get his cues where he's located around the track, which is building and barriers and all the rest of it. And those two compositions then create what's visible for the driver as the track, and what's the physics which is required to drive the car on bumps and curbs and whatnot around the circuit. So we've on purpose designed the simulator to be able to not only take the Formula E chassis, so we can swap the chassis, which is important to get the driver's surrounding as close as possible, to, for example, a DTM chassis. The conversion takes a couple of hours, so literally one day we can do Formula E, the next day we can do DTM. And yeah, it's pretty booked these days, the simulator, because all the projects have a very high demand to get their drivers and their engineers working on the simulator. So what we do with the data after a session is actually pretty similar to what would happen after a real test session or a real race event. First of all, there's a debrief just regularly happening, and then on top of that, the data is obviously analyzed in very great detail. And since everything is digital, we have all the data we could think of, and not only analyze, for example, what the car is doing, but also, for example, analyze the driving style, the driving behavior, and all that together obviously helps us to evolve into the next session. So like our real Formula E car is a tech lab on wheels, we're also using our simulator here as a tech lab, and this tech lab allows us to evolve all parts of the entire chain from car development all the way down to event preparation, and it makes us very efficient and hopefully very to the point.